to spend a few minutes focusing on this notion of emotional intelligence, its importance, not for just decision making with regards to trading, but then the spillover effects that it has as an advantage if developed into pretty much every facet of our life. So I have planned a slightly larger seminar for this because it's just such a large body of knowledge, and I think it's just such a useful skill to have because it's applicable to pretty much every facet of life. So today's just going to be, I guess, a bit of an overview. We'll get some definitions down. We'll have a look at some of the major theoretical constructs that underpin it. And then at a later date, we'll kind of jump more into it because I need to be aware to leave some time for questions at the end as well. So give me a few minutes to just run through what I have here, what I have planned. If you have any questions, please throw them in the PGAMA chat. If you're not sure how to get there, just hover over the PGAMA channel and the open chat button will pop up there next to the invite to server button. So click that, and that's the yeah, that's the one, Ham. That's the one we're talking about. Cool. Alrighty. So let's start with some definitions, right? Because um, we need to gain some clarity first, so we're all on the same page, so we all have some context essentially. So what is it? Emotional intelligence. It is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions effectively during stressful and challenging situations, essentially. Not only your own, but then being able to see them in others as well, and then manage those effectively based on the information essentially that you're receiving back from those individuals. Sometimes you might see it written in literature as emotional um, quotient or EQ. So when someone is talking about EQ, basically what they're talking about is emotional intelligence. So again, it's all about the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. If we turn to the literature, we can break emotional intelligence down into basically five categories. So that's self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So just let me spend a couple of minutes just quickly going over those. So self-awareness, the ability to evaluate those internal or intrinsic feelings, emotions, but then also to understand your limitations as well, and the type of effect that they have on not only yourself, but then those around you as well. We know it's important to be mindful to the fact that the things that we say, the things that we do, and the way that we conduct ourselves, they have a ripple effect around those people that you're having to essentially contend with and communicate with, essentially. The next one's motivation. So this is all about cultivating enjoyment around the things you do, achievement of objectives and milestones, a focus on continuous improvement and helping others. They're more, I guess, the positive aspects of motivation based on the literature. So finding out what drives, what motivates you, whether it be intrinsic reward systems, extrinsic, or a combination of both, is important to know at the individual level, because if you're having a better understanding or a more acute understanding of that, then you can start to arrange your life in such a way where the goals and the way that you align yourself start to tap into those. So there are various questionnaires and things that I can get you guys later on if you're interested to see, well, where exactly do I land with regards to reward systems, essentially. We can also take a look at Maslow's needs theory for this with regards to motivation. So let me just take a moment to bring up a small infographic. I've just thrown the infographic there in the PG AMA chat. So you can see that there's five distinct levels basically. So Maslow was a social psychologist essentially, and he was kind of slightly obsessed with trying to understand what motivates us as humans, what gets us out of bed, and why is it so different for so many people. So he started to sit back and observe people and essentially hand out questionnaires and gather data, and he started to find patterns of behavior basically. So he asserted that based on his findings that people tend to seek out those physiological and safety needs first. Um, so this particular pyramid you can almost categorize into the bottom two levels and then the top three. They're kind of separate in some respects. What he found that people find it extremely difficult to move up to the next level if they haven't adequately satisfied the level that they're currently in, or their the lowest levels, so to speak. So, for example, if you're having difficulty trying to find and allocate clean drinking water and adequate shelter, and paying the bills and things like that, then it's very rare that you'll be seeking uh, various esteem needs, for example. Like promotions, so to speak. Well, in that case, you might not even have a job, right? So, there's certain things that you have to be focusing on, obviously, in order to then, once satisfy them, then he found that people then look for other things in life, look for other motivations and other drivers to get things done. So it's all kind of linked in with uh, goal setting theory and things like that. So motivation, find out what drives you basically. And for some people, understanding theories through the lens of Maslow might be very helpful. They might be able to articulate kind of where they are. If we want to talk more about that, or if you have any questions, let me know and I'll get to it at the end. The next category is self-regulation. Okay, so this is about impulse control, delay of gratification, and effectively managing one's emotions. So this is where we can start to tap into some of those key criteria with regards to EQ and trading, for example. So for those that aren't aware of delay of gratification, it is essentially the act of or behavior of resisting an impulse to take an immediately available reward in the hope of obtaining a more valued reward in the future. So that idea about um, do I take $10 now or $100 in a month? There's been a lot of psychological studies done based on things like that. So one that you may have heard of was the marshmallow test that involved children as participants, and a guy by the name of Walter Mischel did that a few decades ago. So it's all about giving up something small now to gain something larger or more beneficial in the future. So that taps into FOMO, right, with regards to in the trading space. So what I've been observing is those people that do have high delay of gratification, that it's well developed within them, they tend to not give in to FOMO, and they have that uncanny ability to be able to look into the future and see the possibility of much larger rewards. So they give up the rewards that are available to them in that particular moment in time. So there's issues of impulse control and things like that as well, all wrapped up in this. But delay of gratification and emotional intelligence, it just doesn't stop there, right? So there's other studies that have shown just how beneficial it is. So, for example, people with high delay of gratification, they tend to live very, very different lives to those that score low on delay of gratification, particularly kind of in the younger years. So uh, the studies have shown that those high in DOG have better emotional coping skills. They have higher rates of educational attainment. They achieve higher SAT scores. In terms of health, they tend to score lower in BMI, body mass index, and also body fat percentage. In terms of relationship building, they tend to have lower divorce rates. So they're more kind of successful with regards to the way that they manage and deal with their relationships throughout their lives. And also they have lower rates of addiction as well. So it acts like a bit of a buttress or a barrier um, to falling prey to addictive substances and addictive behaviors. So It's an extremely important trait to have. It falls under the trait dimension conscientiousness, which I can talk about more at a later date. The next one is empathy, the ability to identify and understand others' emotions. A very useful skill set for being able to place yourself in the shoes of other people to better understand their situation and point of view. Uh, Particularly useful for competitor analysis as well. When you're trying to understand future directions of NFT projects, when you're trying to figure out, well, what exactly is their mission and purpose and plan here, particularly when it's not well articulated by them. The last one that rounds out the 5 categories of emotional intelligence is social skills. The ability to successfully manage relationships. And that links really nicely with trait openness within the Big Five model of personality, which again, I have a separate seminar for later on. So, those high in openness, for example, they like to experience new things. They tend to load highly onto creativity, imagination, curiosity, and open mindedness. So it's a combination of those 5 facets essentially that make up the overall dimension of emotional intelligence. So self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. It was there was an interesting study done around 1996 that looked at emotional intelligence. That's when it first kind of came to the limelight, when it kind of came to the literature. And it corresponds to the area of cognitive ability that facilitates handling of interpersonal relationships, the promotion of self awareness, social awareness, and empathy. So, intrinsic to that definition, as you can start to see now, that there are those specific parts of the brain that actually handle functions of EQ. So, it's not just some kind of fluffy pseudoscience. We have connections with various parts of the brain that are responsible for the execution of these various things, which I find super interesting. So, based on those definitions we've been looking at, we can start to see a pattern and some themes emerging. We see aspects of managing emotion, self awareness, empathy, the ability to see other people's emotions, coupled with the capacity to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. So, hopefully, that's now provided you with some context around how we define emotional intelligence in the literature, essentially. So, like I was saying, there are so many studies. There's a very large body of literature now that report that EQ affects all those major aspects of our lives: performance at school and uni, performance and goal attainment at work, physical health, mental health, our relationships, and then, of course, the way that we actually trade. Been some really cool studies, particularly in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, that investigate the relationships between those low and high in EQ and those that are trading and how successful they are. And it's very, very clear that those that operate with a well developed uh, level of emotional intelligence tend to come out on top with regards to their trading. So, sorry guys, I'm kind of zooming through this stuff. Um, I'm trying. I've got that meeting at 10 with the other Godjira guys, so I need to try and finish this. So there'll be time for questions, right? So make sure that any questions you have, throw them in the chat, and I'll get to them at the end. So some of you might be thinking, well, what's this nature versus nurture debate with regards to emotional intelligence? Is this all genetic? Is it trainable? Where does it sit in the scheme of things, right? A lot of people think that EQ is largely genetic, that it's deeply rooted in biology. So this is actually wrong. It's been debunked. So granted, there are some genetic components of EQ. So that is, some of that is passed down to us from our parents through our DNA, essentially. However, the current research that's coming out clearly identifies that EQ is trainable, it's flexible in nature, and it can be developed. So this is where we start to look at aspects of plasticity, genetics, biology, and the neuroscience literature and make all those connections. So to me, this is fantastic news, right? Because for all of us, especially those with low IQ that have a willingness to enhance it, it means that we aren't captives and constrained to our DNA with this. That if we want to put in the effort, that if we want to make meaningful changes and develop our EQ, we can do that. We have the power to do it. And this is all wrapped up in the phenomena called neuroplasticity, essentially. The ability for the brain to adapt to internal or external changes, i.e., if I train and do activities on EQ every day, there will come a time where eventually there are mean level changes to our EQ, essentially. I don't want to get too far into it, but what we tend to see is an epigenetic effect. So epi in Latin means on top of. So essentially what's happening is there is a mutation that's happening on top of your DNA that's responsible for the execution of EQ, so to speak, the coding for it. And it makes changes to essentially make it more efficient and improve it. So we can see mean level scores change over a 16-week period when people put in the effort to make those changes to their EQ, essentially. Um, Fascinating stuff. I could talk about it all day. Love it. So it's good, right? We're not constrained to our uh, de- to determinism, so to speak, our biology. So let me now talk a little bit about the emotional of the importance of emotional intelligence in trading, and also some tips for improvement if you're looking to develop this. So, where do I start with this? Okay, so understanding, containing, and ameliorating fear and greed seem to be the key to making money at this point in time with the way the system is in crypto, particularly NFTs. Based on what we've been talking about emotional intelligence, we can see very, very strong links to that. Managing greed, managing fear, and making good, sound decisions during those particularly dynamic periods, right? We know that there are other skills as well, right? So I'm not discounting all of that. It's not all loaded onto EQ, and we could literally sit here all day talking about all the different other skills. But for now, let's just agree, right, that there are other things as well that we can throw in with regards to trading in financial markets and things like that. So basic things like evaluating company fundamentals, determining directions of stock trends, understanding a bit of TA. Those types of skills, interestingly, tend to fall under the umbrella of IQ, not EQ, right? So there's links there with that anyway, which is interesting. So some scholars believe that these technical skills are not as important as the trader's mindset. This is interesting because the literature is kind of divided at the moment, which means I am, because I base a lot of my decisions off, well, what the current literature and what the empirical evidence is saying. So I'm kind of on the fence with this stuff too, right? Um, so, but what we can say is that appropriately managing your fear and greed, containing emotion, being decisive in the right moments, exercising discipline, regulating your emotions around FOMO and things like that have all been evidenced as key components for trading psychology, basically. There's no doubting that, right? And as we found with our earlier discussion, when we look at our definitions of emotional intelligence, all those five components we were talking about, they're all interrelated, they're all linked. So, a little bit more on that. Studies have found that emotional intelligence provides capacity for the trader to better understand the notions and the movements of the market. And in turn, this helps guide the trader to make more accurate, more logical, and more pragmatic decisions that coincide and are in line with the primary trend of an asset, let's say, for an example. So this is also great news for us as traders, right? Because it appears to be that people with high EQ tend to make better trading decisions, particularly in those dynamic and stressful situations where the markets are volatile, which is like the exact definition of what we're operating in, right? Thus, it seems to be the case that in order to maximize trading profits, making those sound trading decisions, executing and developing EQ, and turning it on, so to speak, during those important moments is the crux and a must have ability, essentially. So, tips for improving EQ. So, again, this is not an exhaustive list because there are so many things we can do. Ideally, in a perfect world, uh, this type of emotional intelligence training should be tailored to the individual and their circumstances. It's not like there's a one size fits all approach and a blanket kind of fix or remedy that we can just throw to everyone to just magically kind of develop everyone's EQ. It requires kind of sitting down and having a one on one consult, figuring out the individual situation, and then customizing a tailored approach of activities based on where the individual sits with their EQ at the time. Because we can measure those five categories that make up EQ. It could be that one individual is good in a couple of them, but weak in the other three. And that obviously changes the way that you deal out treatments and diagnosis for that stuff. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. But here's a couple of ways. So CBT has been useful here in emotional intelligence testing, cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's been very useful for improving emotional intelligence in therapeutic situations where individuals can be assisted to learn to better recognize and understand their own emotions. And as they become more mindful of their feelings, they can begin to practice responding to those emotions productively. So, funnily enough, we have someone here in Godjira that has a bit of experience in that, right? I can help with that. So if you're interested, send me a DM and we can work something out. Self-evaluation is the next one I want to quickly talk about. It links really nicely with the self-authoring um, therapeutic remedies. So this is where you start to begin to observe how you react to situations, keeping a proactive eye on the environment around you, examining how your actions impact not only yourself, but then those around you as well. And then it's a critique. It's an honest and an authentic critique of yourself on those points. What did I do well here? What could I improve for next time? And then writing it down. That's the important part. Getting thoughts from out of the mind onto paper is an extremely powerful mechanism for self development. And the literature is very, very clear on that. Mindfulness techniques is our third option. So there's been plenty of reporting here that show useful links between increasing or developing EQ using mindfulness techniques. So essentially, mindfulness in this instance is the practice of purposely focusing your intention on the present moment and doing so without judgment, essentially. It helps shift your preoccupied mind with positive thoughts towards an appreciation of the moment, your physical and emotional sensations, and it also brings a larger perspective on your life and your circumstances, all kind of at the same time. And we've found through study that these mindfulness techniques, when developed, because, again, you're not going to hit the ground running with this stuff, it takes time to get good at it. It helps to calm and focus you, making you more self aware of those cognitions and processes that you're going through. And again, links perfectly with trading in the moment, right? Um, so what I'll do is I've been talking for almost 30 minutes already, right? So I want to leave an adequate amount of time to be now starting to answer all your questions. So like I said right at the start, I'm drawing up a seminar that looks at these aspects a little bit more in depth. So today was a bit of a brief overview. So hopefully now you kind of can consider yourself up to speed, let's say, with this stuff, and you have a good kind of solid foundational knowledge of this. And then from there, we can continue to improve on it and dive deeper and deeper into these facets later on. If you're interested about where you sit with EQ, there's a questionnaire that you can take. There's quite a few, but if you go to the globalleadershipfoundation.com website, oh great, I just had to double check that I was still on. Great. If you go to the globalleadershipfoundation.com, there is a 40-point questionnaire there. It's been empirically tested. It's pretty robust. It has good alpha levels. If you know anything about statistics, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't, take my word for it. I'm on your side here. I'm trying to help. And it's a good questionnaire designed to measure your overall EQ. If you want to look closer at the sub facets of EQ, so those 5 categories like motivation and things like that, I can also find you individual instruments that focus on each of those 5 categories and really go into depth and test each of those 5 categories. So it's probably better to start with the broad view first. Have a crack at the Global Leadership Foundation test. Doesn't take long, maybe 10 minutes. It's free. If you want help interpreting the results, again, reach out to me and we can set up a consult for that. Happy to do that. If you're interested in those other tests, the more specific ones, let me know as well. So what I'm going to do before I kind of kill you guys with information overload, I'm going to shut up for a minute and I'm going to let you guys ask some questions. So let's start. Does anyone want to say anything?
Can it be any question apart from the topic today?
Someone kick this guy.
Now, I mean, I really there's one particular question that I had. Like, I think a lot of them might have as well. Like, the psychology behind. Maybe it's a topic for another day. Like, it's I'm fine with it if that's the case. Psychology behind, like, this people getting like butt hurt when, like, people sell their NFTs, or, like, say you're in a position like myself, and if they see people like me make money, for instance, or sell some NFTs and make money, they just get like, so fucking burnt, right? How do you I mean, like, how do we kind of, like, calm people down for these kind of things as a community together? Like, because me, for example, me selling this MVP, which was given as a free drop by this thing, what is it, 9gag CEO, for being an advisor, and selling at like 35 ETH. People are just getting like super salty about it, right? Like, in general. And I just how, as a person, can, like, both from my side and also as a from the other side, how do we kind of control these kind of emotions? What's the
Yeah,
thing behind
sure.
it?
Yep. So I actually made a tweet. I think it was about a month ago. It's still pinned on my Twitter actually. So if you've added me on Twitter, just go have a quick look because I've added an illustration there. But I think what we're seeing here a lot of the time is comparison making, and we can turn to comparison making theory to try and alleviate some of these problems. So it's very difficult when you're trying to set comparisons. Sorry, my dog's jumping on me. Maslow, down. Um, yeah, my dog's name's Maslow. Uh, so comparison making, right? So this is a problem that many of us face. It's pretty common. And I think some of the things I was talking on before, such as mindfulness techniques, might interlink here nicely. But first, let me talk about some of the comparison making theory. So, as a general rule of thumb, when you try and orientate your life or your trading strategy or any kind of goal attainment and you're looking to external sources to try and benchmark those goals that you want to obtain, it's not very healthy because, firstly, you don't really know the situation and the circumstances of the individual that you're measuring or comparing yourself to in the first place. You've only got elements of data to inform your decision making. There's so many gaps. You don't know their personal circumstances. You don't know what they're going through. You don't even know their strategy, right? So there's so many gaps in the information, which means if you're going to try and make comparisons based on that, um, it's very difficult to quantify, and it's probably going to lead you down the wrong path, right? So instead of comparing yourself to others based on where you're at with trading and things like that, for example, I suggest rather to look internally because, well, the best person that knows you is you, right? You know all the circumstances, you know the financial position you're in, you know whether or not you have full conviction for the project that you're kind of contemplating and analyzing. So you have a much fuller continuum and set of data without as many gaps in it. So there you can start to quantify and make a more accurate and more informed decision to set up your goals and what you want to do with regards to your trading strategy, essentially. There's also the other thing, like I notice when we talk about when people are talking about mental health and spaces and things like that, it always kind of comes up with like try not to be emotional with your trading. Um, so there's some decompartmentalization techniques that you can use in situations like this that can help an individual kind of break the shackles, the emotional shackles, so to speak, that they may have for a certain product, and then, sorry, project, and then that kind of frees them up to make a more, let's say, less emotionally involved decision with their trading, for example. Sometimes it might be more of a situation where it's just about, well, this is my money. Um, I bought this thing. If I'm going to sell it for a profit, then great, right? I don't think people should be making judgment calls based on wallets that they do not own. It's not really my business, for example, Shan, the projects that you buy into and the ones that you want to sell, because that's your money. You do what you want with it. So sometimes for some people, taking that mindset and that kind of more hard-lined approach kind of gets them across the line. And if someone's going to judge them on that, then that's not a you problem, that's a them problem. And trying to figure out why they have a problem, it's not particularly on you. And you can go down a rabbit hole trying to figure out why they're doing that because there's literally like 20 to 30 reasons why they might be thinking about that, right? So again, we come full circle back to comparison making. Um, so rather than focus on external factors to help guide your decision making and what you sell and what you buy, rather just look inward and look at your own situation. Do you have conviction? Do you think this is a worthwhile trade? If the answer is yes, then forget the rest and just do it. I don't know. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it's more than for me as this thing, but I also think it was mainly at least our community. I do not want them to kind of like grow in that path of being like jealous of the success or this thing amongst the holders themselves, because this is something even everywhere you have it, even in your workplace or not just in NFT space, but it's even more in NFT space in the sense somebody gets a number one rarity NFT in the, while like being in the same community. I know we all be like, oh, we're happy for you and stuff, but inside, like, it kind of burns. Oh shit, like I also minted this guy, minted fucking this guy. We both were in the same level, and this guy kind of makes 15 ETH right now because he got a rare one. This is the mindset that kind of differentiates, say, I'm not saying like bored apes in particular, but to an extent, in community building as well, like, because at the end of the day, this kind of a jealousy or this kind of an unnecessary comparison is what makes people take some stupid decisions, because they see their there's two guys talking every day for 3 months, and this guy suddenly makes this money. This kind of allows the other person to go and take some irrational decisions by going all in some project, trying to make that money and lose it all, and then it collapses, and then they show the frustration on the project, right? In the sense, I've noticed this a lot. Like, I've heard few people even tell this, where I go and trade a lot of degen shit because I know Gajira is one project that's not going to let me down. So I can afford to lose some money elsewhere, right? And then they lose the money there, and then they come here. They don't want to sell this, but they kind of get frustrated that the float is not going up, and this it in turn, like, it kind of brings a negative energy inside the community as such as well. So this comparison part, or unnecessarily, your meal is different to another person's meal, and it's not going to satisfy your hunger. This particular thing is what I want to try and inculcate in our community as such. So,
Yeah, definitely.
definitely
So I
answer.
guess, yeah, yeah, sorry to cut you off. Essentially, what we're seeing based on those examples that you provided is people are projecting, right? So they've obviously failed in other trades and they're still holding, say, a Gen 2 or whatever, and this is their outlet to vent. So it's really nothing on the project at hand itself. They're projecting their inadequacies because they feel bad because they didn't make a decent trade. And then that's where aspects of high emotional intelligence tend to work really well in those types of situations, because rather than be all negative and start fudding a project that has no kind of place being fudded, they're just projecting it in that area because that's the avenue that they have at that time. A person with high IQ generally wouldn't do that. And actually, if they made a bad trade, that they would actually use it as a learning experience. So it's something positive in terms of personal development and something that they can use in future trades to become better, essentially. So mindset is wrapped up in EQ to an extent. And that's one of the reasons why I started this week with emotional intelligence, because if you can develop that, then a lot of these problems that, for example, you face as a trader, and also as a project founder, if I'm teaching this stuff to people here in Godjira, then hopefully they're learning and developing their EQ, right? And then there's a flow on effect down through the discords and the chats and things like that. That's how I envision, that's how I kind of set it up to be anyway. So it was all about fostering a strong Gojira kind of community. Like the more that we can foster solid, pragmatic thinking traders, the more productive and the more efficient the community is going to be as a whole, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming at it with that.
Of course, and I think yeah, I think thanks a lot for this, and I'm looking forward to more sessions. I think this is one aim I think I myself would probably start attending on a regular basis.
Awesome, man. Good to know. Great to have you here. And the thing with projecting, those that are projecting, again, it's it's kind of inefficient if you start to kind of listen to what they say and take them on board, like, because that's more of a them problem, not you. Um, if someone's doing it in the chat, I'd love to know. So if anyone sees anything like that, please let me know. Send me a DM and I will reach out to them. And then we'll try use it as a learning experience, right? So I'm happy to help at that level as well. They may not want to listen to what I have to say, but that's another issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case. Like, look, like the number of people. There's very few people who want to learn. They just want to be fed. And as I say to people, I'm not too worried about it because, in the sense, like, it's not that hard to end up with a community of 3 to 4K people who have the same mindset over a period of time. um yeah, I mean, whoever comes in, whoever like listens, they're going to benefit in one way or the other if they're ready to, if they got an open mind.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm trying to make this stuff as palatable and easy as possible. So like with the questionnaire, it literally takes 10 minutes. And then almost instantly an individual's got insight into their EQ. If a person is interested and has a willingness to do some activities to build their EQ, I have a whole set of activities that I can hand out to give people that they can do on a daily basis to build that. And the activities, they take maybe 5 to 10 minutes max per day. And if you do it um, based on the literature, if you do it for regularly for 4 weeks, you'll start to see changes, but the changes aren't that high. You have to do them for roughly 12 to 16 weeks to see like whole standard deviation changes, like big significant changes. But in the scheme of things, if you can spend 12 to 16 weeks developing an extremely important life tool that's going to make you not only a better trader and bring in more money, but help you with your relationships, your other finances, your work, and everything else, then to me, it's an absolute no brainer, you know? So I'm basically trying to do that, basically make it as easy as possible, spoon feed. All they have to do is execute, and away they go.
Yep, and people are asking about the what is it? Some activities and stuff, like list of activities or something, that what you mentioned about. Maybe we could do a like a list or something later for the and post it in a holders announcement or something.
100%. Yeah, I can do like a Word document or something that people can just download and then kind of carry it with them and start to go with it. So yeah, I planned on doing that. Yep.
Perfect.
So for those people asking, list of activities, how to improve EQ, I've got your back. I'll have that list done in like a Word document or something over the next couple of days.
Perfect.
Does anyone
Anyone,
else?
anyone wants to come up on VC, or is all everybody shy to come up?
How many people are here at the moment?
I don't know. I think 60, 70 people. I think last I checked. I'm not sure, but I'm not
Okay.
sure what's the number now.
Hey Josh, I dropped some stuff in the chat. I can't speak right now because of my son, but I dropped some stuff in the VC.
Oh yeah, there's two chats actually, Josh. Just letting you know, there's one in the voice chat that people just post their comments, and another one in the PGAMA. If you just kind of highlight this, there's an open chat there as well, right? So there's two chats what people are using actually.
Okay. Um, yeah, I can see them all coming in now. Right. Okay. It might be easier if someone could jump on the mic, to be honest, because I don't even know where to start. I got questions coming left and right. I could just scroll up to the very top and start. Um,
Probably go from the bottom because we have a team meeting soon as well. Probably another 10 minutes.
Plus, some of
Um,
the questions have probably already been answered as well, the top ones. So, but while I'm trying to find one, does anyone want to jump on and step up and ask a question?
Tell them to get a meme list, and people would come up.
Oh yeah, I've got there's
Do you
50
have a meme list?
whitelists. Oh dear, how am I going to do that, dude?
I
think
I don't really have a question. I got something to potentially add to like what you guys are talking about. Maybe that will allow somebody to ask some questions and stuff. If you want me to do that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, I mean, Josh, you were talking about it, and Shan was adding on to it as well, right? So, I mean, to be successful, you have to, at the end of the day, set goals for yourself, and essentially meet those goals, and then not look at other people and really care about what other people think about you or yourself, because all that's going to do is put more stress and more burden on your shoulders. So you just have to set your short term, midterm, and long term goals and just work towards those. And those can always be ever changing. So you have to be able to willing to be very flexible. And whatever you're trying to do, this doesn't just go for Web3 or Web2, it goes for life. Is you just have to set those goals, be flexible, and just start knocking those little check boxes and then just continue to grow and grow and grow. And then don't be scared to put in the work. Don't be scared to learn, to educate, to if you finish college, don't worry about it. Just go to the next step and then just continue to grow and grow and grow and build your toolbox where you're just have this plethora of knowledge, and then things will just come easy. Connections, um, coding, or whatever you want to do, it's just going to come easier and easier and easier to you as long as you grow that toolbox that you have of knowledge, and then you'll be fine. So just to add on to what you guys were saying.
Yeah, there's a separate seminar that I want to do on goal setting theory, because that's obviously super important, and you touched on that. So I might move that seminar up the list a little bit, um, so we can kind of connect the dots with that. Guys, also, if you want whitelist, first 50 to post their burners in voice chat, get it. Not that chat, the other one. Not the PG AMA chat. The voice chat. It's almost like we need someone to manage the whitelist for these AMAs. Anyone else? Please, someone step up. We're all friends here. Don't be shy.
Sorry, don't post your wallets. There's a form coming up. I think Sack Attacking is just preparing a FCFS form. It's really hard to copy paste all the 50 whitelists. I mean 50 wallets. So he'll just be posting a form for you guys to drop your thing in just maybe like 2 minutes or something.
Yeah, that's probably a better strategy. Thanks for that. Thanks,
No.
Ken. I've got 8 minutes before meeting. Let's go. Adiz, mate, let's go. I know you have questions. No one can speak. Why? Should be pushed to talk.
Bro, is this working?
Yeah, I can hear.
Ah, cool. Yeah, I just got on, bro. I missed your other one in the 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 other seminar that you ran
Oh,
earlier
right.
today. Yeah. So just the time didn't suit, bro, and I was out during that time. But yeah, I've literally kind of just tuned in.
Yes, so there's a good point, sorry, just made in the chat, which is reminding yourself of kind of why you're here. Why did you enter this space? What do you want to achieve out of it? Um, that might be able to provide clarity with regards to setting your trading strategy up. And then once you have that top level long term objective, then you can place some more incremental type short term and mid term goals in order to keep on track. Again, I'm kind of touching on the goal setting theory here. I'm going to have a separate seminar for that. But with regards to setting goals in life, the literature is pretty clear. Um, you set your long term goal first, whether it be a year or 2 to 5 years, depending on what you exactly want to achieve. But then you have intermittent goals along the way to keep you focused, to keep reminding you of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and also to provide a source of motivation to move to the next goal, so to speak. Also, setting goals is a bit of a skill because there's some interesting studies that show that if you set benchmarks and goals that are too high, then there's a propensity for people to be too challenged and then they kind of start to wane and then they end up not getting there basically. But if you set goals that are too easy on the other continuum, then it's likely that you might get bored and then also start to wane due to reductions in energy and motivation and stuff like that. So setting goals that aren't too challenging and difficult but not too easy is a bit of something that takes a bit of trial and error. And the only person that can really do that is you. Um, so that's another thing that I'd like to touch on in the seminar coming up with goal setting theory. Also, you may have read interesting articles here and there with regards to It's more about the journey than getting there. And then people uh, sometimes report that it feels almost anticlimactic when they reach some of their long-term goals, because then it becomes a session of, well, what the hell do I do now? There's that existential dread that starts to come across them, because now, well, I've gotten to this goal that I've spent so much effort and blood, sweat, and tears getting to, and I got it, and that's great, but what next? So it's also about managing expectations and making sure that you've always got something that you're striving for. And again, that's another summit seminar that I want to include in some of our discussion. It's about aiming high, and if you're not going to aim high, at least aim at something. um, I'm sure that we've all seen a lot of those self-help books, those gurus getting around that just continually talk about this notion of happiness and the pursuit of happiness. um, Happiness is great, but is extremely hard to quantify, and it changes as well. It's ambiguous for many of us. So, in situations like that, I'd rather talk about finding meaning in life. And as a byproduct of finding purpose and meaning, the happiness kind of comes along with it. So, when I have people come into the clinic and they're suffering from some form of kind of existential dread because they lack purpose and things like that, oftentimes they talk about happiness. So it takes a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy first to get them to understand that you probably shouldn't be aligning your goal setting theory with the pursuit of happiness, because it's extremely difficult to orientate your life around that, because your idea of happiness is quite ambiguous for many people. Rather, find something meaningful, and generally, they don't like that, right? Because usually something that garners meaning often implies that there's a struggle, right? That there's challenges, that there's barriers that you have to punch through, that there's some sort of suffering that occurs during that journey in order to get there. And that's where also some training is required with regards to mindset, because to me, the challenge is the stuff that I'm looking for, because that there's a nobility in that. It's easy to take the easy road out, you know what I mean? There's a lot more satisfaction, and it's a more enduring level of satisfaction that often occurs when you face your suffering and you're struggling and you punch through those barriers and get out to the other side. So for me, that's where meaning really comes from, in situations like that. And then as a byproduct of that, the happiness comes with it. I hope that makes sense.
Yo, Josh, it's a D. That was a great explanation, bro. Um, Thought I'd just vibe in with you and ask a question. Um, just in regards to obviously we try to cater for our own mental health, and well-being, but when you see those around you suffer, sometimes it's pretty hard, I guess, to know a correct approach on how to speak with them when you know that you're down. Like, for example, being remote and working away, I see it all the time. People hide behind the alcohol that they drink, or they hide behind a smile, but getting into that conversation about really what's bothering them and how to assist them. Do you have strategies or ways or tips just in regards to how we can approach someone like that without kind of stepping on their toes and encouraging them to actually speak out? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I'm here to talk to blah, 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 blah. But how do you prompt that next part where they actually open up so that they can get something off their chest and you might be able to help in the system?
Yeah, again, it's probably going to require a tailored approach based on the individual's circumstances and the type of kind of suffering and hardships that they're going through. But I guess as a general rule of thumb, articulating that you're kind of going to always be there as a support mechanism means a lot in those situations. Also, never underestimate the notion of saying something encouraging. I've been in the clinical psychology field for about 15 years now. So I've been around for a while, and there's only a couple of things that still kind of surprise me and shock me to this day. You know, I've seen all the continuum of pathology and mental disorder, but there's one thing that still kind of really kind of touches me at the heartstrings sometimes, and that is the fact that it is amazing to me that people can be 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and they've never ever had someone in their life mention or say an encouraging word to them. Like no kind of formal recognition, and they kind of come into the clinic and then you kind of see that and you start encouraging them just with little things like you're doing great, it's good that you're being proactive and taking a front foot approach with this, that you obviously have a motivation and a drive to improve your circumstances, little things like that, and you just see their whole body language change. You see like their face kind of light up, and because it's something that's kind of been so foreign to them in their life, that when someone actually says some encouraging words to them, I've seen people like dramatically change their perspective on things and really get ignited over things like that. And it can be literally just one sentence, you know. Um, so start there. So encouraging words for many people might not mean much, right? Because they've grown up in very supportive families, collaborative families, and things like that, where not that they take it for granted, but it's something that they kind of grew up with, right? But then there are those individuals that have had very, very, very little of that. And they tend to be the ones that do carry a lot of existential dread with them. And it's amazing how just saying that I'm here for you, I'll support you as best as I can. If you want me to go maybe read some literature to find some kind of activity or something that we could do or you could do by yourself to potentially alleviate the situation you're in, I'm here if you want me to do some research on that. Um, if it's something that you want to talk about with me, for example, happy to take DMs. If you have a friend or a family member or whatever that you're not quite sure what to do or say and you want some advice, reach out. But if you want to try and tackle it yourself, start there. So act as a support mechanism where possible, and then also words of encouragement, man. Like cost nothing. It's easy to disseminate, and it makes a massive, massive difference.
So yeah, I just want to say, like, if you sorry, I keep on forgetting I'm on push to talk. So if you look at mental health, yeah, I think I agree with everything you've said. Obviously, you're quite knowledgeable with all of your years' experience. But I just wanted to mention like education in this space, and like when you touched on short-term goals and achieving those goals, you know, the small bites. Um, for anyone that, you know, a lot of people have a barrier to entry when it comes to education, and I believe that, you know, education can help um, with mental health. Like even if it's just a, you know, it's keeping you busy or you're achieving certain things. So I want to mention edX.org, which is basically an international organization where you have the top universities around the world that offer free courses that anyone can take, whether that be Web3 courses, whether it be mental health courses, whether it's anything you can think of, anything that you are interested in or love, you can find it on edX.org. And it's completely free and online and at your own pace. So that takes care of any barriers to entry or entry barrier.
Yeah, that's great that you mentioned that. There's also a lot of universities that have free short courses in mental health and things like that, building resilience and those types of things. I know Stanford University are quite big on that, and they have a massive archive um, of short-term programs that are completely free that you can access. So, thanks for actually mentioning that. That was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on edX, sorry, just last thing, on edX, I mean, you can have, there's universities like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Oxford, like all the top universities, and it's all free. So, yeah.
Yeah, great resource. Guys, I know that I missed some questions. I'm sorry about that, but I really got to get to this team meeting. So maybe if you could DM me your questions that weren't answered, let's do that. Because I hate walking away from situations like this where people have asked questions and I haven't been able to answer them. So please send me a DM, and we'll either set up a consult to go through it, or whatever works. So sorry I have to cut everything off. You guys just keep going if you like. I got to jump into the other Discord, but thank you so much for turning up. I know it was a little bit rushed at the start. I might have to start this thing at maybe 8:30 instead of 9, and that'll give us maybe an hour and a half. That might be a better way of going about it. But thanks for turning up. I hope that you learned something, and I'll see you in the server.